This part may be a little painful for Jehovah's Witnesses. In this I shall most certainly agree with other apostates who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, presenting the painful reality of their experiences on social media. We need more people like them to talk freely to those who are free to think and be. In those courageous presentations, the witnesses are encouraged to wake up. I can only admire their standpoint and the way they present their findings, but I wonder if the witnesses are permitted to watch them or hearken to reason and truth. The apostates often make mention of John chapter 15, verses 8 to 10, where it is written, "My Father is glorified in this, if you observe my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have observed the commandments of the Father and remain in his love." The Watchtower magazine, dated March 15, 1989, page 28, contains these words, "The fruit of love is evident among Jehovah's Witnesses." They must be joking. Apostates usually talk about this, specifically speaking of three important issues regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. According to one, the apostate makes mention of several young teenagers being abused by a number of their elders who are supposedly appointed by Jehovah, and as he knows that this is not a new story, for it happens all the time. One elder had been imprisoned for a period of time, but many others had not been reported to the police. For although other elders had known about the abuse, they were allegedly repentant. Let us remember that the witnesses apply their two-witness rule, and most certainly sweep the case under the carpet. Another abuse case concerning a violent husband against his wife and children was concluded by the elders, declaring that the wife was in need to become a better one. The witnesses tend to punish the victim and not the perpetrator. You would never know if you are talking to a criminal or pedophile when they visit you. Considering the issues in regard to blood transfusions, which Jehovah's Witnesses never allow, many young and old have unnecessarily lost their lives. Imagine a mother having a brain hemorrhage and refusing a life-saving transfusion, thus leaving her children motherless. This is a true story, and similar tragedies have happened throughout the years. I was also nearly a victim of the same. Paul Blizzard and his wife's story is noteworthy because they kicked the witnesses out of the hospital and allowed a blood transfusion to save their daughter's life. It eventuated in them being disfellowshipped for not obeying Jehovah's commandment as issued forth by the governing body, watching their daughter die. This is the expected pattern for them to observe. However, it can be seen in the light of human sacrifice similar to that one discovers within ancient satanic practices. A 15-year-old after a nasty car crash and a 14-year-old leukemia sufferer have died after refusing blood transfusions. The apostates also point to another problem with the witnesses in regard to shunning former members. A number of ex-witnesses have committed suicide after being shunned by their only friends from within their congregations and families. One woman committed suicide after being thrown out of their organization due to her addiction to smoking. Another well-known case is that of James Olson, who died having thrown himself off the Brooklyn headquarters after being naggingly forced by his parents to go back. Remember the words in the Watchtower magazine, "The fruit of love is evident among Jehovah's Witnesses, but the evidence proclaims otherwise." After all the experiences, many, like myself, had my advice to the witnesses is to wake up to the fact that theirs is not God's organization. It is not spirit-guided and not inspired of God. We read within Jesus' words, "You will know them by their fruit." All their prophecies have been proved to be false, and the world did not end on the dates they predicted, like May 22nd, 2012. Jehovah's Witnesses consider every disfellowshipped person as their enemy and shun them. Unfortunately, this is part of their worship and also my story. What about Jesus' intimate words? Love your enemies. Remember that he said unto his disciples, as we read in the Bible, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." John chapter 14, verse 6. Only recently we have discovered that Watchtower had joined the UN. There are a few video interviews available on social media where some Jehovah's Witness elders decline to answer questions posed to them, and yet we are constantly told that they would never join the world's politics, nor be a part of Babylon the Great, i.e., UN. In their congregations, members are told the world is controlled by the all-powerful Satan. Therefore, they are encouraged to think that the entire political system belongs to him. One can only urge people to think for themselves, to take note carefully and intently to what is considered here. Personally, I am one of those who love life and entire humanity unconditionally. One hopes that you will consider what is being said so far without any bias and prejudice. Everything presented here is on an as-is basis, without blaming anybody, and remaining truthful, because my story is actual and real. It is a resume of my life's story in regard to Jehovah's Witnesses and my unfortunate involvement with them. It is not presented to be judgmental against anybody or to paint some people as wicked. Indeed, the witnesses are extremely judgmental people, painting anybody and everybody as wicked, but are incapable of seeing it while groping in cultist darkness. They could not refrain from considering me as an evil and wicked person while helping my ex-wife break all family ties. Even today, she attempts to paint me as the rejected of God at every opportunity, advising her son and daughters not to involve their father in important issues as she sees fit. I have enough evidence to support this, while admittedly I would never consider her in the same way she classifies me under Jehovah's Witness dictums. I love all humanity. If you are a practicing Jehovah's Witness, take note of what is being said here, although you would be discouraged and barred from discovering the real truth by visiting any of the social media sites on the World Wide Web or lending libraries. Frankly, I would consider it a miracle if any of the witnesses and their supporters would read this literature, written without bias, but on an as-is basis. I would like to congratulate any witnesses who are curious to read about my account open-mindedly. If you are a non-Jehovah's Witness and want to know all about them, again without any prejudice or bias, you are welcome to consider my programs as well as that of other apostates like the ones on social media. Therein you will discover a few hidden truths about what the witnesses really preach and do. One thing is certain, they have stolen a large chunk of my youth, yet I have survived. Knowing what I know, I decided to tell you a few facts in regards to myself and the witnesses using a number of Bible texts, encouraging you to think independently and discover what you are dealing with if you are tempted to study cult of Jehovah. I am not interested in complaining about and painting someone evil, and only intend to offer you some friendly advice as an assumed ex-member of their organization, who is shunned by all my witness friends, including my wife and children, being treated like a criminal, indeed a wicked evildoer, for questioning the Spirit. I am a professor of psychology, and although retired, I still occupy myself helping anybody with their dilemmas in a limited fashion. I'm also a philosopher and an artist, teaching art and exhibiting my works worldwide. Hopefully, I am not seen as if bragging. I also conduct discussion groups on philosophical and scientific considerations. I'm a person who ardently desires to see a happier world around me, and am not against any religious ideal or belief system, although I do not follow any theological order, but do question the existence of an esoteric God and his supposed opposition, the devil. It is an issue of good and evil, as considered throughout human history. I am intending to put some Jehovah's Witness attitudes under the microscope and let you be the judge. To do this, I will quote from the Jehovah's Witness publication, Awake, July 2014 issue, page 15, where one reads, "The true religion teaches the truth from God's Word, the Bible." John chapter 4, verse 24, and chapter 17, verse 17 quotes, "God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Sanctify them through your word. Sanctify them through your truth. Your word is truth." This literature advises the reader that true religion helps people get to know God. John chapter 17, verses 3 to 6, "This is life eternal, that they might know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." We also read in the Bible that God announces his name as being only, "I am that I am." True religion promotes unselfish love. John chapter 13, verse 15, "For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you." It teaches people to respect all races and nationalities, to avoid sharing in the wars of nations. Micah chapter 4, verse 14. The witnesses claim that true religion is a way of life, and its members practice what they preach. Romans chapter 2, verse 21, and 1 John chapter 3, verse 18. "You therefore who teaches another, do you not teach yourself? You who preach a man not to steal, do you steal?" Really, Jehovah's Witnesses, how can you even mention something like this? Was it not you, having stolen a large chunk of people's lives, kicking them out without understanding their dilemmas, and leading them to commit suicide? My little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Do you, Jehovah's Witnesses, really love your brothers in need and truth as you preach? John chapter 13, verse 35, "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love amongst yourselves." Hebrews chapter 10, 24 to 25 mentions, "Let us consider one another so as to incite to love and fine works, not forsaking our meeting together." Are Jehovah's Witnesses truly practicing what they preach? Have you ever been shunned by your family and friends? Have you ever been kicked out of an organization wherein you were loved only as long as you danced to their drumming, and afterwards felt abandoned, lonely, and suicidal? Many former Jehovah's Witnesses have experienced it after being judged and disfellowshipped. This trend is more evident when they are met by active witnesses and treated as if they do not exist. I too had my share of this treatment. Is it not ironic to hear them advise you on how to deal with your loss, your innermost emotions, your agony and stresses? They always quote from the Bible, pointing at the text you can read in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. "There is time to weep maybe they need to consider that there is also a time to crumble for their worldwide organization of absolute evil. The so-called apostates do not need to apologize for their unbiased observations of the real truth. Interestingly, the witnesses advise you to avoid isolating yourself, yet their dogmatic rules isolate you from life. They advise you not to take everything said by others too seriously. Do not take heart every word that people say. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 21. This is also an interesting point to consider. The majority of them take the gossiped untruths more seriously than the truth itself. They consider the Bible advice on the dead that they are going to be resurrected. However, they believe that God will resurrect only those faithful witnesses, and the rest of humanity, like the disfellowshipped, will be ushered into everlasting damnation and complete annihilation, for Jehovah is righteous. They advise you to pray to God for wisdom to deal with your circumstances, for God will pay attention to prayer of the destitute. Psalm chapter 102, verse 17. However, the Bible does not encourage its readers to pray to a false god or an organization of falsehood and treachery. Does one need to be utterly miserable and destitute for God to take note of the situation? According to what we are advised by the witnesses, prayer helps us to draw close to God. When we often express our feelings to God, we apparently develop closer friendship with Him. James 4:8. 1 Chronicles chapter 28, 9 says, "If you search for the Lord, He will let Himself be found by you." The witnesses would allegedly help you find the invisible God, teaching you that God is love, and that Jesus advises you to love your enemies. If, however, you are disfellowshipped, you are always considered as the enemy of God, and therefore classified as the enemy of God's supposed organization on earth, namely the Watchtower Society. You are forever shunned as an evildoer by all your alleged friends and family. In reality, you are hated forever. Are the witnesses following God or the devil? Is it possible that perhaps they are doing the will of the opposer, for he has no mercy for sinners, and conducts his witnesses into separations and heartaches? A father, wife, mother can willingly shun their partners, sons, daughters, brothers at ease, and feel no emotion, for that is their religion. Let me be a little more specific. Jehovah's Witnesses would not listen to what their mouths utter or what is being said. Remember, the name of God was removed from the Old Testament for a reason, for a long time, but then the witnesses put it back into their version of the Bible. The name Jehovah appears about 6,000 times in their translation of the Holy Scriptures. The King James Version, as with others, uses the word Lord instead. But here is a problem. The God in the Old Testament is portrayed as jealous, wrathful, and angry, whereas Jesus speaks of His Father as being the God of love in the heavens. How can the God whose name was claimed to be Jehovah by the witnesses be the same as the God portrayed in the New Testament? Let us compare one of the texts which repeats in the Old Testament. 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1 states, "And Satan stood up against Israel, and provoked David to number Israel. And David said to Joab and to the rulers of the people, Go, number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring the number of them to me, that I may know it." 2 Samuel chapter 24, verses 1 and 2 states, "And again the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved to David against them to say, Go, number Israel and Judah. For the king said to Joab, the captain of the host, which was with him, Go now through all tribes of Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, and number ye the people, that I may know the number of the people. Here we discover that the Lord is the same individual as Satan. This Lord has also been replaced by the witnesses to read Jehovah instead. There are numerous texts to consider describing Jehovah as an angry and jealous God, and if the witnesses are correct, then logically this God can only be evil. It is written in Judges chapter 9, verses 23 to 25, Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the man of Shechem, and the man of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. God sent an evil spirit does not sound right for a God of love and righteousness. If we take the Bible as literally as the witnesses describe them, what we read in 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 20 to 23 shows clearly that the God of Old Testament is a destroyer, and yet at the same time a God of love. I know that if any of their members would question the elders on these issues of great concern, they would only shun and disfellowship them. Maybe they should read Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8, where we read, How do ye say, We are wise, and the law of the Lord is with us? Lo, certainly in vain he made it, the pen of the scribes is in vain. When the shunned suffer great emotional pain and extreme stress and commit suicide, Jehovah's Witnesses feel nothing. Is that spiritual? Why would anyone pretend to believe in the absolutely impossible? The truth is that those who shun their friends, fathers, sons, and wives, appear to have no feelings, for they know not that God would never cause such evil to anybody. Are they therefore created in the image of God, or fooled into feeling this way? The word God is derived from the Teutonic word for good, and it stands for all things good, all things loving and wholesome. Destruction and enmity are the products of an evil force. In John chapter 13, verse 35, we read what the good Lord says, By all this you will know that you are my disciples. In the Christian way of understanding, God is love, God is righteous, and God is forgiving. All Christians speak of the same. Jehovah's Witnesses additionally speak of the importance of imitating God's loving, reasonable, and consistent discipline, and advise parents that their efforts will benefit their children. One can read it all in their Watchtower magazines. I will now ask, after they kicked me out and destroyed my family, what have they done to discipline my children? Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 says, Train a boy in the way he should go. Even when he grows old, he will not depart from it. But that does not imply abusing your child by forever beating him, sending him to bed without food, and reminding him many days later about his wrongs, and punishing him severely by perhaps breaking wooden spoons on his buttocks. Some Jehovah's Witness parents have been doing so for ages, and I can confidently say that they still do. Nor should we forget that many children have been abused by the appointed elders throughout the years. My ex-wife was an excessively harsh disciplinarian. What evil force or God would delight in inflicting pain on children or adults? Is it truly God inspiring them to do so, or the other one? Magda endlessly claimed that she was precisely following the advice given as in the Watchtower magazine of July 1st, 2014, page 12. Effective discipline is founded on love. When faced with a difficult situation, postpone discipline until you are calm. It does not say to beat your son to death and desperation, but it indicates to talk to your son calmly. It may be written to advise the parent to consider a child's limitations. it also encourages the parent to be consistent. If you have warned the child that a certain form of discipline will follow if he misbehaves, then be sure to follow through. My ex-wife used to warn our children that if they did not pray before meals, next time they would have no food. Not wanting to look foolish in front of other people, she warned them that she would punish them when they were home. She most certainly followed through the advice given when they had already forgotten all about it, thus leading them to always feel apprehensive and fearful in front of their mother, resorting to tell lies to gain favor in her eyes. This taught them to become very pretentious. Perhaps this way my supposed daughters were helping themselves to feel better and above everybody else. I could not tell Magda anything, for she treated me like a low kind of person and never tried to listen to reason. As a real Christian mother, her methods of teaching the children never had to be questioned, especially after being thrown out of their organization for having questioned the Spirit. I was seen as a great sinner, unworthy to be considered as a human being and a father. She often shouted at me in front of our children, "Go behind me, Satan." Was this the type of discipline they were advised to follow? According to Proverbs, chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, Jehovah's Witnesses claim to teach that discipline is not just another word for punishment. It is related to instruction, education, and correction, and never connected with abuse or cruelty. I wonder what my ex-wife has learned since then. In the same magazine on page 7 one reads, "The Bible clearly tells us what Jehovah and his Son Jesus Christ will do about the sufferings caused by Satan the devil. For this purpose the Son of God was made manifest to break up the works of the devil." 1 John chapter 12, verse 31. That may be why, in their limited capacity of thinking, the witnesses break up families and destroy the lives of individuals by shunning them. Obviously, Christ will stop the sufferings caused by the devil by stopping the witnesses. According to their teachings, without Satan's influence, a righteous new world will be established, and this earth will become a peaceful place. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. One wonders if, after all the sufferings they habitually cause, will Jehovah's Witnesses, who are also a part of the humanity they hate, be around to see that new world of things they preach about? Proverbs chapter 2, verses 21 to 22 states, "Only the upright will reside in the earth, and the blameless will remain in it. As for the wicked, they will be cut off from earth, and treacherous will be torn away from it." Obviously, they believe it does not include them. Indeed, God, the all-good, cannot remove the gift of free will, making humans into robots. But the witnesses live by the rules and regulations set and dictated by their organization, just like automated slaves anyway, don't they? Have they by any chance got any free will while they play with words, when they cannot admit that they are enslaved to their uninspired governing body? This issue of Watchtower advises you, if the idea of living in a world where bad things will not happen to good people appeals to you, why not make it your aim to learn more about the true God and His purpose by studying the Bible? It sounds very appealing, does it not? However, I say, before attempting to do anything, do your research independently and learn about the history of any religious ideology, discovering their lifestyles without being fooled by their smiles and impressive words. Be yourself, and then decide whether to learn all about the Bible with them. Your best option is to get yourself a King James version of the Bible and read it by yourself first. Remember, the witnesses have no idea who the true God is. 1 John chapter 5, verse 19 says, "The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one." Remember, the witnesses are also part of that world. They are not living in a different planet. According to Bible wisdom, Satan and his demons are misleading the entire inhabited earth and causing woe for the earth. Revelation chapter 12, verses 9 to 12. This way, the principal cause for wickedness has to be placed on Satan the devil. Are Jehovah's Witnesses really so righteous while boasting about it? According to their teachings, only one force is capable of boasting about its own existence, and that one is what they purportedly oppose. Perhaps they should apply more caution about what they attempt to teach and who they condemn. After all my personal experiences throughout the years, I realized that none of my Jehovah's Witness friends were genuine. They were blindly sucked into a divine publishing company without realizing, and did neither cared for anything else, nor wanted to know about the reality of things. They never consider how they have hurt so many people, not even wanting to know, sacrificing dearest members of their families to a satanic cult by shunning them and offering their children as a sacrifice to an evil deity who they led to believe is Jehovah, by not allowing blood transfusion when desperately needed. In reality, they were not my friends, not even to themselves or the world. My real friends were those who accepted me as I was, without trying to change me or being critical of my looks or how I dressed. A word of advice from me as a friend of humanity and not a follower of the devil, contrary to what the real evildoers consider, is this: be yourself, be confident, and strong. Do not be tempted by the tempters going house to house and door to door preaching about the supposed word of God. Remember Jesus' words about the last days and false prophets? Be very discerning. Do not fall into the trap of abandonment and feel guilty for being a human. Be yourself. If you have experienced disfellowshipment, strive to find like-minded people and talk with them about your innermost feelings. Know that you are never alone. Rejoice, for you are now free from the darkness, bondage, and the devil's clutches. Be free, laugh, frolic, and dance. You are free to be you. Shun no one in your lives, for it is truly evil. Be at peace with yourself. Let me now take you back a little in time. Despite having endured awful circumstances with him, I traveled to Egypt and Peru with Damon, whereas I desperately needed time to be alone, to reinvent myself in the real world, and create some meaning in my life. However, Damon never respected my needs as a human being, and even wanted to shoot me, or at least hoped to force me to go down on my knees and ask his forgiveness for whatever reason only he dreamt of. Discovering he was hitting his head against a brick wall, for we had applied for a restriction order from the police, he allegedly became miserable and very frightened, as he later claimed. After a while, he tried threatening me that things would get ugly. I believe this was his way of begging me to meet him, for he probably did not know anything else, other than his traditionally threatening ways. As I said before, despite the advice of some friends, I was unwilling to face him, but eventually met him at Café Siena on Chapel Street. He expressed his supposed regrets, and we started meeting on a seemingly friendly basis, sharing food at specific restaurants once more. Call it courage if you like, but I will still call it absolute stupidity on my part. It really felt as if some of my friends wanted me to end my life in a drastic manner, because one could never trust somebody like him. It was as if putting one's head on a chopping board. I was invited to a number of Jewish traditional celebrations, including Sabbaths. Eventually, he wanted to buy an old established house and land next to where he lived, asking my help at an auction. Later still, he pressurized me to conceptualize a circular space station type of home, with all the modern facilities needing to be architect approved. After a few structural alterations, he built it just the way it was allegedly prophesied. He wanted me to utilize the lower part as my art studio, which his current dwelling was to face, so that he could watch me whenever he desired from his bedroom. When the house was completed, he wanted to climb on the roof and watch our space brothers from there, probably using his telescope. However, he had never experienced stargazing using his optical equipment before. Let me tell you a little about the house in East St. Kilda. This was where he envisaged I would be housed, paying him rent, and the house would become mine in the long run. But when questioned, he repeatedly told others that he was buying it for his sister and her family when they came to Australia, for which he wanted me to furnish an invitation and sponsorship application. Once the house was established, he demanded that I move out from Springvale, for, as he claimed, he felt very sad about seeing me live there. On top of this, he did not like my old furniture, wanting to have everything replaced. And when we needed to do the important shopping, he insisted on asking advice from Christy about what to buy, for she, being a woman, had to know what a bachelor like me needed. In truth, it was so ugly when I was completely ignored, as if suffering senility, and not knowing what I wanted. When at the department stores, he totally ignored all my suggestions about what I wanted to get regarding furniture, chairs, kitchen table, and fridge. Very quickly, and without any thought, we had to choose anything, whether it matched or not. Everything I said and pointed to was disregarded, for he was in a hurry to roll joints with his boys. His desire for me not to have anything to do with the authorities was also surprising. He did not want me to apply for any interim assistance from any government department, and suggested that we make lots of money through spiritual work like Christy did. He said that if I conducted meditation sessions for his handpicked associates, perhaps even doing some channeling, he was going to pay me wages. He was very cautious where authority is concerned, and did not want to be found out. Extreme phobia in the air. This is where I continued conducting meditation sessions with my other friends, although he was ill-pleased about it. However, to satisfy his curiosity, we started a different group with his chosen friends, a lawyer, accountant, actor, and businessman. And alas, this is where I have been forever interrogated by everyone for long periods of time, questioning me about my integrity and challenging me to prove the reality of UFOs, but I was never interested in promoting anything like that. Obviously, the idea was promoted by Damon to his friends, and I was unaware of what he was purporting. I had no choice other than play just another game, hoping this would soon come to an end, because they literally used to drain me, during which my creativity was badly affected. I conducted mind-over-matter experiments to the surprise of those select guests. I encouraged them to take photographs of their own choosing when frequenting my place, and additional images became apparent, astounding them. They were all very keen to please Damon, as if he was their boss. Maybe he was. Damon respected me only because of my having met Shirley MacLaine, the silver screen star. He never respected my needs, forever hindering me from undertaking any creative work, such as cinematography and wedding photography, in effect forcing me to do only spiritual work as he understood it, while constantly telling me I was going to be very rich. Several times I spoke a number of keywords for a specific purpose when privately conducting meditation classes with my other friends, words which contained secret codes. Alas, to my dismay, I discovered Damon repeating them later, without being present. That made me very suspicious about him having bugged my residence so that he could listen to what I said or did. Later still, I became aware of Rosemarie's words when listening to his radio in the car. Upon my inquiry, one of his associates discreetly told me all about it, begging me in great trepidation not to say anything to him. There were listening devices placed in my home and incorporated with the landline phone. I said nothing. I started conducting a minor campaign of speaking select words for a test. And interestingly, the same words were uttered by him moments afterwards. Since he was often inspired when having his shower in the morning or at night, as he claimed, I felt the need to pretend to believe him, becoming psychic. Observing that other people proving to me that there were listening devices in place saddened me a lot, for he was indeed extraordinarily frightened, like a guilty child, as if someone was going to punish him severely. I was also surprised to hear Damon's chosen associates demanding me to show them my wounds so that they could believe me. They did not make any sense, for I did not know what had been said behind my back, as what or how I was described to them. Sometimes we conducted our spatial group meditation at other chosen friends' places, and at one time I became aware of Damon and a few others of his friends talking about me being highly intelligent, and that perhaps because of my educational background, I should be involved in Israeli politics. But my lingual deficiency was not taken into account. Eventually, they thought of a solution for that too. I could improve my Hebrew, and it would be perfectly fine for me to enter the political world. Was I perhaps considered suitable cannon fodder? However, they soon discovered how uninterested I was. I wondered whether such behavior was based on assumptions by a group of people who were heavily intoxicated. If I was interested, I would probably have better chances to enter the political culture within Australia. I was living in a world of make-believe. It was a world of total isolation, where I felt the loneliest. Some of those who I considered as genuine friends were advising me to endure and wait for wonderful things could come out of this adventure. I was living like wealthy people considered the norm by the so-called elite, without any of them realizing what my true circumstances were. Obviously, they did not realize that I was unable to generate any income due to all the restrictions imposed upon me. Damon interfered in everything I desired to do to establish my own small business, unless it was as he desired it to be, spiritual. What he understood by the word spiritual was never clear. I was indeed living in a fool's paradise. In truth, I was simply stored at 315 Orong Road, St. Kilda East, Victoria, 3183, as of 12th of November, 1998. I even remember my landline number, which was 03-9527-5849, and my mobile 0412-117-252. As mentioned before, when I could not answer incoming calls, you would hear an outgoing message advising callers to smile and be happy, which really annoyed Damon. In his dreams, Damon was in love with Julia Roberts, the famous American silver screen star. He has never met her, but worshipped her. His first daughter apparently looked like Julia, and he hoped that she too would one day become famous. He often asked me if I could find Julia's address so that he could be in touch with her. I believe Julia could be contacted through International Creative Management, 8942 Wilshire Boulevard, Beverly Hills, California, 90211, USA. However, did he know how Julia would react to him? Did he know how best to contact her? He even demanded that I write to her on his behalf. Life continued. We shared some Jewish festive occasions, but his sister and brother-in-law started asking him how much he knew about me, and criticizing him for being stupid in allowing Suren to take advantage of his generosity. He started to question me even more, often repeating his sister's words about who I was or why he needed to assist me. He told me that we hardly knew each other, querying if I was taking advantage of him, thus obliging me to remind him of his insistent promise to help me, knowing that I would eventually buy the house he generously purchased for his sister and forcing me to move into. I believe his accountant, relatives, and associates also helped him to consider that Suren was a foreigner, and his sister and family did not need to be living in a rental property. Observing his changing and worsening attitude, I began to look for alternatives. During one of the last private sessions we conducted at his place, I had a very strange feeling, as if he was intending to get rid of me as he assumed that I was not in trance, instead answering his completely illogical questions, seemingly inspired by his guardian angel. After the session, he told me he suspected that I was not truly talking to him under a hypnotic trance, as if I was obliged, and that perhaps I was pretending to channel, but I never wanted to do it in the first place, due to the warning signals, and not being desirous to be physically harmed. I certainly did not know what his intentions were from one moment to the next, and felt like a sitting duck. I decided from then on never to conduct any such private sessions, let alone any trance-based channeling. A few weeks before, he gave me large quantity of dry hemp in large plastic bags as payment, telling me that it was of excellent quality. It was so clear now that he expected me to make money by selling those hallucinogens on street corners. He told me nothing other than paying me with such items, and I decided to put them in protective tubes and hid them for later times with the purpose of presenting them to the authorities while making sure his fingerprints were not affected. I was going to do so if he attempted to harm me, but a long time later, together with my friends, we destroyed it, as I did not want anything to do with Damon or his associates. About this time, I was surviving on monies received from my meditation groups in a minimalistic way, and whatever assistance I was able to receive from the relevant government department. Before things eventually went out of hand, he wanted me to design signage for one of his petrol stations, and employed an Indian gentleman named Ashok. After asking my opinion about what our so-called spirit friends and his guardian angel Mr. Megoya thought about it, I always made sure that everybody followed their own hearts, therefore avoided influencing their decisions. But the $500,000 he lent to this person disappeared overnight due to his gambling habits, which Damon did not know about. After sacking him and feeling sad about Ashok, he bitterly complained and told me the poor man and his family had no place to go, living on the streets. He told me I should have known him better, and told him all about this long before Ashok's employment by him, and that perhaps I should experience the same, and know what it is like living on the streets. That was devastatingly shocking, as I pondered on my previous lifestyle when living on the streets. It was nothing new, but it sent shivers along my spine nevertheless. Damon repeated his words. "Professore, you must understand that one needs to blame somebody else. Somebody else. Somebody else." Shortly after, he kept bitterly complaining about why I was not under hypnotic trance the last time I channeled, demanding that I should come clean. He was going to give me a call early in the morning for me to answer him why I was allegedly pretending. Understandably, I was extremely perturbed. I could not sleep that night for yet again being accused of telling lies, and spoke to Joan and Rosemarie. It really felt that some evil beings of the invisible realm were adamant to destroy me completely, and would not let go ever since my marriage to Magda, and undesirable involvement with the witnesses. Although very critical, there was a time that I almost believed there were curses and blessings fostered by superstitious belief systems, but was calmed with the knowledge that there was always a logical explanation. In the morning, remembering Damon once asking me why I never shouted and told anybody off when angry, and that he would not mind if I did so to him, for we were all brothers, and he would certainly not worry about something like that. I contemplated that perhaps he needed that sort of treatment to understand me. Maybe he would be able to understand his own treatment of others. As promised, he called, asking me to come clean about my grave sins against him by pretending to channel, not linking him with the invisible realm. I did not care for anything anymore, for I just had enough. I raised my voice and told him what the fuck he thought of himself, that he should command everybody the way he did. He was in great shock, for he never expected that I would react this way. Then he said I was too loud, upon which I reacted deliberately, harshly, and told him what he never wanted to hear. After putting the phone down, I contemplated that he would most certainly ask me to move out, in order for me to experience what Ashok had. I needed my friends to keep me company, as I did not want to be tempted to commit an untenable action, for under such levels of stress one could behave erratically. Accordingly, Joan, Rosemarie, and Wilbur came that morning, and as per my desperate need, I spoke with them. They were all in agreement that I should move out. Maybe I should once again store my belongings and stay at a friend's place until other accommodation became available. I was not in a position to pay a deposit for something like this during that period of time, not even having any food. I was literally starving in reasonably luxurious accommodation, which was meant to accommodate Damon's sister anyway. I felt like an excess, not needing to be there. Joan advised me to leave all my furniture Damon wanted to replace behind, taking only the personal necessities. She also reminded me of many of us having once survived on cardboard boxes, and we could do the same again, if necessary. That did not appeal to me, for I had my share of misery before. Since all the furniture was to replace my worn-out ones, when I moved to East St. Kilda, I was entitled to keep what was mine. Damon called me to come clean again, telling me that we were now at war, and one of us had to go. I told him I was prepared to go without further consideration, and thanked him for all his wonderful friendship. I had certainly learned a lot from him. He repeated my words and told me to move out, taking all the furniture with me. With the assistance of my good friends, I started packing, storing everything elsewhere, and decided to vacate the premises within the month, if not sooner. While busying myself with the usual chores, I remembered how my dear son Claude once visited this place with his then-European girlfriend, admiring the double brick house with double-glazed windows. He was professionally happy with them, for they had also little beads in between to stop excess noise from outside. He was listening to extremely loud music in his four-wheel drive, avoiding his sister Annette's dwelling when driving to places like Ripon Lee, near the ABC studios, When questioned why he was driving this way, while I was seated in the back, he answered me saying, "You know why." I still don't know, but ignored it. However, I was so surprised by him suggesting to his girlfriend that his dad was going to pay all the wedding expenses at that lovely historic site. Did he know or care what I was going through at the time? We kept removing my belongings and cleaning the place. A week later, Damon rang, telling me to leave all my furniture, all my belongings, and all my clothing behind when I left, after he had spoken to his accountant. At this time, he had already wiped my name from our supposed partnership as a business, and his accountant's secretary advised me to just let him go and live my life without worrying about any of them. I decided to furnish a legal document with the assistance of Rosemarie, who was knowledgeable about legal issues, and hand-delivered it to Damon's solicitor with the house keys when I vacated his sister's home. I also left one of the computer workstations behind for his brother-in-law to use, as a compliment and for their wonderful tolerance, and accepting me as their friend. Rosemarie, on the other hand, made it very clear in that document why I needed to stick to Damon's first decision, after supposedly talking to his accountant. We have heard nothing from any of them ever since. For my son, I might have appeared as if I had disappeared once again. That was not what I wanted him to feel, but I did not want to become a sitting duck for the criminally minded. I was now extremely happy about having left it all behind me. Some people were trying to console me regarding my assumed sadness in relation to my family, which was split, but in reality they never questioned my current state and the awful circumstances I was forced into. One person I have known in the past exclaimed that if the circumstances had been more favorable, and I stayed with my family, I would probably not be in this unfortunate state. It was not a great help. My ex-wife had many friends she could turn to and receive at least some moral support, whereas my only friends were, in reality, just a few. Through their assistance, which I thoroughly appreciate, I am alive today. With their moral support, I was able to close my eyes to all kinds of injustices I was subjected to. Through their genuine smiles, I knew I belonged to the human race. Through their acceptance, I never changed my opinions about those experiences I was subjected to within the human world, but I forgave those who opposed me. I was now like a newly born child, ready to start living, and this way everything in my world remained always fresh and always new. I could no longer be sucked into any organized belief system of much darkness and ignorance. Considering these points, I took the advice of my childhood friend, who the world considers non-existent. You just conducted an experiment. Now you will leave it all behind, and live your rightful life without any burden to carry with you. He was so correct, and if I had a chance to relive those times, I could no longer consider changing the past, for I knew that there were many others I had encountered who also needed to learn from their experiences of life. But have they learned anything? Now that I was completely free from Damon's tyranny, I stopped everything ever undertaken or demanded of me for a very long time, for none of his input would work for me. I even gave up going to the dentist he had recommended, who was about to fix yet another crown for one of my other teeth. He was a well-known doctor in the Jewish sector of Melbourne. This dental professional was keenly interested in light aircraft and flying, and was fascinated with my interest in the same, unlike Damon, who did not feel comfortable about it. I often chatted with this doctor about the how and wherefores of flying a variety of aircraft, from tiger moths to Cessnas. But for now, we needed to stop all that for a while, due to my inability to travel there at ease, although I was quite capable of paying the expenses of repairing my dental anomalies. I sent him a courtesy letter explaining my situation, but have not seen him since. Around this time, having no immediate accommodation, Joan and her husband suggested that I could stay with them as long as I wanted, although Damon had hoped and wished I would be living on the streets without even any clothing on me. My real friends would never allow me to be miserable, homeless, and destitute, although I was certain that my ex-wife, just like her wonderful brothers and children, would. With no one to turn to, I had to accept their offer to stay at 119 Browns Road in Noble Park. At this time, Wilbur was living with one of his boyfriends, and I could occupy his room for a short while. The room I was to stay in was very small, but endurable, and I wondered how Wilbur survived there. He had my artwork based on Frazetta's Bounty Hunter on one of the walls, bringing back some pleasant and not so pleasant memories. I was a little concerned about Wilbur, wondering how he would take me staying in his room if he decided to return, but Joan assured me that it was not likely to happen any time soon. When Claude came to see me while I was still living at Orong Road, he promised he was going to visit me again when he was in Melbourne next. I had no way to contact him because he never disclosed his address or phone number, and I did not even find his sister's details in Perth. If by any chance he tried visiting me, he would discover that I had left, and could not be easily found. His surname, changed by his strictly witness mother, was not going to make things easy. For example, how could he claim to be my son when he had totally different names? I was still surprised by him jokingly asking me to pay his wedding expenses when he got married with his European girlfriend after our visit to Ripponlea. What also amazed me was that I had no contact with my daughter Birgit after I had given her a cassette recording of one of my radio programs, wherein I spoke about my theories over what others were pondering for centuries, that human life was still like a puzzle, and who knows, maybe we had chosen our parents before being born. But she had bitterly opposed the idea after listening to it with Magda, who found it to be pagan worship under the dictates of Satan the devil, like all the other Eastern philosophies. She said everything I was saying was listenable, until dear Mum heard my words about us having chosen our parents before birth, and could not any longer listen to the satanic wisdom. Therefore she had to return that recording. From then on, we had no communication for a very long time. Obviously, she was listening to the advice of her all-knowing and never-judging mother too. In fact, I knew with absolute certainty that Magda preferred her son and daughters to have no communication with their father, who she considered as a devil worshipper and everlasting liar. Knowingly or unknowingly, she turned them all against me, considering her deeds as Jehovah's righteousness. Remember, the witnesses oppose anything and everything which sounds outlandish. After all, Magda, like her witness brothers and sisters around the world, must support and provide the 8 members of their organization to build their empire in the States and survive. When Birgit somehow managed to contact me after many months over my mobile phone, she said she was likely to visit Melbourne, asking if she could meet me in town or come to my Browns Road address. But she never came, and probably even lost the address I gave her. We lost contact altogether. I already had too much on my plate to worry about. I could stay at Joan and Willis's as long as I needed, although Joan would love to have my company forever. But I felt a desperate need to find different accommodation. I was living in a very restricted way, for I could not do the things I wanted to, such as having my musical instruments to play my favorite classics, or compose songs which reflected my inner world, or painting subjects which interested me. I was still feeling lost and shocked due to the unbearable restrictions I had to put up with when Damon was supposedly helping me to become, as he repeatedly said, very, very rich. I could not forget the attempts of certain people involved with Damon to run Rosemarie over by accident when she visited me in Orong Road. It seemed his boys were under instruction to do the deed. It was so obvious that when she was crossing the road in that very moment, somebody always attempted to deliberately maneuver their car at her. One only hopes this movement was wrongly interpreted, but was it? However, Rosemarie was very aware of the situation, and Damon bitterly hated her for having complained to the police about his unacceptable behavior. Additionally, Margaret was constantly calling me on the telephone just to ask me when we were likely to get married, and demanding that I became her attorney. My son Claude asking me to pay his wedding costs when he married his current girlfriend, although it might not have been serious. After experiencing everything undesirable from everybody around me was causing me great stress. Although I was staying with Joan and her family, I was not on my own. As a guest, I could not live my life as I needed to, and I still felt as if I was in a dull coma. I was hardly sleeping, getting up very early while everybody slept, having a quick shower before sunrise, and rushing to the Waverley Gardens shopping centre to spend my unfortunate time drowning myself in cups of coffee, writing some poetry on pieces of paper, and pretending to be very happy. I was probably following the advice of one of my grandmothers. Fake it before you make it. Smile, and it will become real to you, and you will see yourself doing it. Often meeting Joan with her daughter Shannon and son Wilbur at this shopping centre over cups of hot drinks was refreshing, but meeting Jean has not always been a happy one. I had no other engagements, and so very slowly I returned home at the end of the day. Sometimes Joan or Wilbur, after frequenting the Sanity Music Store, drove me home. I could do nothing other than listen to Joan and her family telling their stories, eating, drinking tea, and having an early night. Although I have thoroughly appreciated their genuine care, this was not the lifestyle I wanted to have in the long term. However, this still was the best choice for me, rather than forever agonizing about my own as well as my friends' safety while I was living in East St. Kilda. My health was deteriorating, and I needed several medical tests. Dr. Sorsok, of Coptic Egyptian origin, was my general practitioner, just behind where I was staying at the time. He was worried about my stress levels, and trying to help me, he suggested a few vital tests in regard to my prostate. He made mention that my lifestyle and stress levels were not healthy, adding more to my excessive discomfort with certain parts of my anatomy. Just like my stress-related condition, my urinary tract was not functioning as well as it should. I was directed to hospitals for further tests, and finally a biopsy needed to be taken by urologist Mr. John Corambas in his surgery. Dr. Sorsok referred me to him on 7th of February 2001, and on the 13th at Southern Urology in East Bentley, a biopsy was taken using a probe without any anesthetic. I still have no idea why such a painful procedure was necessitated. I was given extremely strong painkillers to take. They did not alleviate the pain. I could obtain the results either from their surgery or from Bellbird Consultancy in South Blackburn. But the reports were not to my liking, as my prostate was unnecessarily enlarged, and we needed to keep an eye on it. In both cases, Rosemarie helped me attend a number of clinics and hospitals. Alas, my prostate seemed to have grown beyond the accepted size, and was causing discomfort. Dr. Corambas explained that this was still on the reasonably safe side, but one had to watch for any changes, and we needed to check the PSA levels, prostate-related antigens. If they increased, it could indicate the presence of cancer. Imagine how it felt. I have always been very careful about my lifestyle and diet, believing it to be the best way to keep healthy. However, I was often on a starvation diet, and believe it was having a detrimental effect on my physique. On the other hand, fasting can be very beneficial for us if we are considering a healthy longevity in life. Maybe we need to avoid the excess of anything. I started adding a little more saw palmetto in my diet, for I knew that this herb had the tendency to assist in maintaining good prostate health, and sometimes helped reduce its size. However, if cancer had already set in, other options had to be considered. If I did not have enough trials in my life, having a health scare like this was not going to be very helpful. But I was determined to do everything possible to combat the situation and succeed. Some people I encountered have loosely been telling me that perhaps those who could not have what they wanted to get out of me were effectively cursing and putting charms on me. I'm not sure about that. However, my uncertainties, fears, and disappointments were the real curses which I had to put up with. Some people could never grasp what traumas they were inflicting others with, for they were void of understanding due to being one-track-minded under the influence of cults and belief systems. I need not give you any examples of this, for we have already made mention of a few. This was a very stormy period in my life. I was occasionally waking from my slumber in absolute anxiety, thinking that perhaps my wonderful ex-wife and her gorgeous children were praying for my demise, surrounding me with the most unfavorable negative vibrations, as they had for a very long time now, and probably it had some effect on me. But I had very serious doubts about it, because although Magda most certainly hated me, for she was incapable to love anyway, she could not have been this bad. It would be exactly what she was avoiding, as she did not want to become the disciple of Satan, the devil, while wrongly believing that she was serving Jehovah. To tell you the truth, as I honestly thought of her then, especially after she changed her looks, she looked like an evil witch, with her thin silver white hair and penciled eyebrows. I was unsure about her children, for they were full of lies. However, since I was never superstitious, like certain cults, and certainly Jehovah's Witnesses, I could not expect it from my first love, whose love had to grow. I remained dependent on medications for my mild asthma, and now needing to take a few more. It was not going to make much difference to my lifestyle. I needed to have more regular checkups, blood tests, and live in a stress-free environment. I became more frightened of life as time went by, and now I was also excessively frightened of death. I tried to forget my current dilemmas by putting my mind on other interests. Speaking of interests, if my ex-partner had any understanding and wisdom to see the necessity for any man needing to have interests, whether it be sports or music, she would never have nagged me as she did. She preached about respect needing to be earned, but alas, she has not earned mine. If she had any wisdom of her own, she would make sure that her daughters would never be led to utter disrespect against their father or herself by encouraging their lies and believing in them as if they were telling the truth. They were far from it, and always ready to please their mother under duress. What I am now going to say is by no means prejudicial. She had a very weak personality, and unfortunately, Jehovah's Witnesses have taken advantage of it. Whatever I now tried to do was not very helpful. I was still in a dull coma, and could not even put some paint on a brush to create art. I decided to do some part-time tuition for people who were interested in drawing and painting, but could not afford to pay for art classes. Interestingly, a nearby Uniting Church was looking for a volunteer tutor for an art class, which mothers who stayed home to look after their babies could easily attend. I thought that it would be a wonderful opportunity to practice art once again. After an initial interview with their coordinators, which I attended with Joan, I was given the keys to the church, and I was to be responsible for opening and closing the doors when those classes were conducted. It became reasonably popular in a short time, and it was so beautiful to see those young mothers with their toddlers eager to have a go at drawing and painting. During this time I spoke with an elderly gentleman about what a frightening experience it was to have prostate-related concerns, and he assured me that there was nothing to worry about if the complication was detected at an early stage. It was one of the most easily cured forms of cancer. He himself had such an operation and was very happy with the results. It was when I began to think in terms of having a good chance of surviving this ordeal. After some time of going there with Joan, I started spending time with Rosemarie at those classes. Joan had other concerns at the time, such as having to smoke with her close friend Jean at her place and gossip. I suppose that was their need. There were no hard feelings about this. This is where some of my students were very regular. Others were either a little shy or somewhat apprehensive. However, Jean was completely against me and opposed Joan helping me in any way. When I frequented Waverly Gardens shopping center, spending a little time at Jim's coffee lounge to have my usual cappuccinos and unusual sandwiches, Jim and his sister, both being from Queensland, could not get over my strange tastes. I often asked for a sandwich with peanut butter and Vegemite. His sister, who was once a nurse, used to make the sandwiches when she was helping him. They were friendly and asked Joan and Wilbur how it was possible that this very well-educated and cultured gentleman had strange tastes in food. When I discovered their curiosity in regard to my choice of sandwiches, I told them that perhaps I was an alien from another galaxy, thus making them both have a good laugh. In another area of the center, there was a well-established bakery, the proprietors of which were Jehovah's Witnesses. They were keen talking to me about the kingdom and the end times, using every opportunity to preach to people. When they discovered I had some involvement with them in the past, they began inviting me to their kingdom hall. I had been buying my freshly baked bread from them, and they were extraordinarily happy when they saw me. Naturally, they did not realize that I was disfellowshipped, and a lot of things were being spoken against me. I was not going to enlighten them. Some time later, they moved out to somewhere else. My lecturing assignments were not as often as they used to be, for I was still invited to do them on a sessional basis, thus forcing me to look for additional part-time employment, which was becoming extremely difficult. With my current health condition, it was very hard to obtain the right kind of employment. On the other hand, I desperately needed to establish a different and more permanent accommodation. I pondered about how expensive such a move was going to be, but rejected getting cold feet. I frequented a few familiar estate agents. In the meantime, after visiting Rosemarie's flat in Kelvinside Road, we had a discussion about better accommodation. Where she was at the time was not right for a cultured and well-educated person like her. But it gave me some idea how it would be like when living in a unit of that kind, if there was a suitable dwelling available. Its size was not bad, but the whole place looked bleak, cold, and very clinical indeed. I did not think she was too happy living there, although she expressed herself as if being content. Maybe she was happy with her neighbors, but from time to time she spoke about preferring to live alone, and I could understand that too. because I was happier that way, especially after my children left me. I had a strong feeling that Rosemarie wanted to move out to somewhere else, and even a different suburb, but was not desirous to share a property. I never thought of sharing a place with anybody either. We spoke further and pondered that if there was a house with a bungalow at the back, we could occupy the place and share expenses. If that happened, I was willing to settle in the bungalow, for it would be easier to keep it dust-free and clean, and would not interfere with her private life. But she said she could happily live in the bungalow. Although she never thought of sharing a place with someone else before, she was very happy with the idea. Soon after I heard about such a place, which excited me anew, and I could not wait until I shared the information with her. It was ready to move in when I first visited the place with Joan, and when speaking of it to Rosemarie, she was very enthusiastic. A week later, the owners decided to let their relatives live there, after we had already made our arrangements to move in. Rosemarie and I were very disappointed. However, soon another dwelling became available, and I decided to inspect it and see how best we could share it. How strange it was for people like us who only wanted to live alone. I cannot help but fondly remember Fyodor Dostoevsky's words. Only the heart knows how to find what is precious.